If you believe in a united Europe, who would you vote for? Are you looking for a centrist alternative? The Ave Europa movement claims to fill that gap. But how? In our recent interview, we asked them about their vision for Europe, their stance on the European army, how they plan to build the movement, and how people can join. This is our interview with Ave Europa on Forum European.
So, hello everyone, this is the newest episode of the Forum European podcast, and today's guest is Nikodem from Ave Europa. We would like to thank you for your participation in this episode, and in this episode we will talk about the Ave Europa movement. So, the first question is the following. What was the main motivation behind the birth of Ave Europa, and when and how was the movement created?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show. And when and how was the movement created and why? I think the why is the easiest part to answer. I think many people, myself including, in the Eurofed space, wanted something like Ave for years, and probably should have been created, frankly, decades ago. Europe should have been more federalized and united decades ago, and it's a historic blunder that we haven't done that. And I think at the beginning of this year, 2025, just so many things came together that we had a spark that ignited real, Euro-patriotic sentiment across our continent. We had Ukraine war getting worse, and President Trump berating Zelensky, starting to betray and also abandon our alliance between Europe and the United States. And there was a huge outrage. And many people said, okay, the United States, we are not that trustworthy partner. It's time for Europe to grow up, stand for ourselves. And if we don't want to be divided and colonized by Russia, by MAGA, we have to work together as Europe. And many movements, European federalism isn't new. We have that for decades already after World War II. Before that, even. European federalism started over 100 years ago. After World War II, there was a big push. We know all the history. And I think many movements that existed so far, like Young European Federalists, the European Federalist Union, Pan-Europa Union, but also mainstream parties, they just they weren't focused enough. And we wanted to create something that was more focused. And then the question, how was this created? Well, basically, we had a few people from different pro-European organizations, pro-European sentiments, but also people with no experience on politics, coming together, mostly through social media, through X, initiated by a Lithuanian chapter of the Young European Federalists, mostly by one guy called Vilius, who just said, well, we want to start something called Ave Europa. I will reach out to some people on X who look like they would fit in. We will set it up. And then things started going in March, I think the 6th, 8th of March. We were initially 20 people, then 80, and now we are 500. And the movement started to professionalize, to develop, and it grew very organically. Just a bunch of people who came together online and said, well, we want to unite Europe, we want to focus, we are not happy with the current options we have in the space, and we will start doing it. And now, 9 months later, in December, we are almost 500 people. We are growing rapidly, getting dozens of applicants every day. And yeah, it looks like we are starting to take off, and it's a great feeling.
Thank you very much. The next question is about your targeting group, the group that you would like to target. You spoke about this in the previous answer as well, but who do you see as the main group who in Europe itself who would like this movement, and what do you think? The young people are those who like federalism, or it's not connected to a generation? So what do you think about this?
Well, ideally, our goal and aspiration is to create something that's appealing and takes into account the desires and needs of ideally all Europeans. That's the ideal. In reality, of course, we have to target a certain audience. And I think generations isn't that much of a demarcation, because while as most political movements, we have a lot of very young people, we have also people from all generations. Like if you look at our international board of our mother NGO, the youngest board member is 18 and the oldest one is 58. So we really have like 40 years difference between the youngest and the oldest. And I think the median average age is probably in the 30s. So we try all age groups. And what has been important for us from the beginning is to really create something that's capable to reach the mainstream society. Because if you look like at established movements, like for example, Volt, in our opinion, the problem why these movements haven't been so successful in uniting Europe and are still like rather fringe, despite if you look at polls, Eurofederalism being very popular, is that they package Eurofederalism in a very academic, big city, urbanite, very progressive, leftist, you could say woke policy. And that doesn't appeal to many people. That's like maybe 5% of society, 10. It doesn't appeal to 80% of people if you look at different polls, at least for like I know for Germany. 80% of Germans are not interested in, for example, pronouns or gender topics. If they are interested in Europe, they want to unite Europe and not focus on other topics. So we really want to have something that has broad mass appeal and that really has a chance to unite also ordinary citizens. So this is, I think, our main target audience. Slightly younger, maybe Europeans, because they're just more active in politics, but all age groups and all Europeans who are interested in Eurofederalism and who haven't been targeted by the existing institutions and organizations so far.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is about the structure of the movement itself. Mm-hmm. So, what is the structure of Ave Europa, and how do you plan to expand the movement itself?
Well, the structure here we have, frankly, had to learn a lot from our predecessors and also from established movements like Volt, because if you want really to make a pan-European party, and this is our goal, to create a pan-European party you can vote for, join in every European state, no matter if you're in Portugal or Ukraine or Georgia or France or Germany, Poland, you should be able to join and engage through our party, our movement for European federalism. The problem is Europe is not united. We have in every country very different legislation around organizing political organizations, parties, and so on. So we follow a model that's very typical for organizations of our kind, which is we have one mother organization, one NGO that's currently in Denmark, from which we organize a movement for all of Europe. So we create branding, social media, and so on, and help coordinate. And beyond that, we have a very bottom-up approach. So our most important thing, where our pillar of organization are our national chapters. So in every European country, we try to set up an NGO or an association or a political party. It, again, depends a little bit on the legal stuff, because, for example, in Germany, it's very easy to set up a political party, while in, for example, Slovakia, you need like 10,000, I think, signatures, while in Germany, 3 people are in theory enough to set up a party. So right now we are starting to set up NGOs, association, or parties, depending on what's the best thing, in different countries. Right now, this is Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, and Lithuania have their first associations, which will be turned subsequently into parties now in spring. And like in Italy, France, Belgium, Portugal, Romania, we have already like begun the work to set up something up. And we have this ground structure with the national chapters, and internally we are organized very democratically because we believe in democracy, we believe in grassroots, bottom-up democracy, which is also like our ideal for a future European federation. And therefore we have like an internal senate, we call it the Federal Council, where each national chapter sends 2 representatives who then elect the board and make all the like HR decisions. And above that, it's the board with 9 members, of which I am one. And that's basically it. It's a very lean structure, but very democratic and very transparent, because we believe this is also a way to organize Europe. We have to be democratic and like take really the people on board.
Okay, so Volt and for example, the Union of European Federalists are the 2 main movements, and Volt is a political party that can be labeled as pan-European. And they are federalists as well. But especially regarding federalism itself and about European federalism, how does your vision of a united Europe differ from these 2 entities? I mean, Volt and the Union of European Federalists.
I mean, for one, I think the Union of European Federalists, they are like not a party. So they are not as ambitious as we are. I think our ambition is to become a movement consisting of not only associations and NGOs like the European Federalists, but also of a political party. And so we are more ambitious. We also want actually to impact policy directly. So the fairer comparison is like to Volt. What's the differentiator? What makes us different from Volt? And that's a fair question. And I think what we offer is that we fill a big gap on the like political market, because as I said before, Volt, it depends a little bit on the countries, but especially if I look at Italy or at Germany, Volt turned very much to the progressive left side of a political spectrum. And this is a side which, of course, doesn't represent all of Europeans and not all of Euro-federalists, especially as European federalism started out as a pretty conservative project in the 1950s. We had the Ave Europa Union with Charles de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer. I mean, Konrad Adenauer even wanted to have a European army already in the 50s, which like mostly didn't happen because the French didn't want to have a joint command for French and Germany directly after the Second World War. So European federalism has been historically something that has been appealing to the whole of a political spectrum. But in recent years, movements like Volt made it into a very progressive and more leftist issue and a very green issue. And I think that doesn't represent all the people. I think if you look especially at polls, many people, especially a majority of people, are more centrist, more liberal, also maybe more right-wing, and they don't have an option. If you're, for example, someone who's more right-wing, more conservative, or more liberal, classical liberal, in many European countries, you don't have really, and you're still a European federalist, you don't have anything you can vote for, because most of the right-wing, conservative, classical liberal parties are Eurosceptic or at least neutral, with some exceptions. Like, for example, in Germany, we had the Liberal Democrats, but they are very pro-European, but they are irrelevant right now in the polls. So I think the basic answer is that we try to cover up a big mainstream within Euro federalism that right now doesn't have a proper political representation.
Thank you. We read a lot of opinions about Ave Europe on forums like Reddit, and one of the main arguments against Ave Europa itself was that it created a division inside the Euro-federalist movement by especially splitting the vote with Volt itself. So how would you respond to this criticism that would like to have one single party that represents European federalist ideas?
I think this is not a very valid criticism. It's because for the simple reason that we don't really take away voters from vote, in my opinion. But what we do is actually probably even help vote. Because many people who are more liberal, more conservative, more right-wing, they will never vote for Volt, because Volt does mostly very left-leaning green policies, which they don't agree with. So they either don't vote for Volt at all, or they will vote for some party who isn't maybe very pro-European. Like in Germany, they will vote for the FDP, or they will vote for the CDU. And so they have no proper representation in Volt. But when both Volt and Ave Europa are established political parties, I think European federalism will become more will get more mainstream appeal, because it will be not only a leftist, urbanite academic topic like it is right now for the Volt, but it will become a mainstream topic that is interesting for both the right and the left of our political spectrum. And it will be pushed more into the mainstream if Ave Europa is successful with what we are doing. So I think over time, Volt will actually profit, because we will, like in tandem, increase the relevance of European federalism on both sides of a political spectrum. And ideally, we all want to take voters from each other, but actually boost each other and make old national parties more relevant. Because if we want a European federation in the future, we will need pan-European parties that can actually organize politically across the continent. And as of now, we have only one for the center-left with Volt, but we don't have one for the center-right, which is what Ave wants to do. I think if we have this will give way more legitimacy and way more credibility to the entire European Federalist project. So Volt has nothing to fear from us. They have, I think, actually to gain, and there's more like we are twins that work for the same thing on different sides of the aisle.
Yeah, it in my opinion, it would be a great thing as well, because the debate itself would be put into a European context, and
exactly.
That is very important.
Yes, I mean, also, you don't have to forget that if I look, for example, I'm also Polish, I live in Germany, but also in Poland, Volt has a very hard time to get a footing in like Poland, Romania, Hungary, because more the eastern part of Europe is more anti-communist, more conservative, and they're very skeptical if European federalism comes dressed up in this very progressive branding Volt has. So it doesn't catch. So we can bring European federalism to like the east of the European Union, which I think Volt will struggle for probably a decade still.
Yes. The next question is about these national parties of Ave Europa. So first of all, how do you envision the cooperation between them? And the second question is about their autonomy. So how much autonomy would national Ave Europa branches have? For example, to adapt to the specific political and cultural characteristics of their country.
Mm-hmm. I mean, pretty much actually. For one, legally, there are in all of Europe you have laws on foreign interference. So even if you're a pan-European party with an NGO in Denmark, the Danish NGO can't tell, for example, the German Ave party or the Hungarian Ave party to do X, Y, and Z, because it would violate foreign interference laws against influence from abroad. And that's something we respect, because the rule of law is for us central. We are not like Russia that buys elections. And so we will have and want to respect also the autonomy. But one thing we have as like a control mechanism, of course, because we have to have some cohesion within the movement, is that to call yourself Ave Europa in some country, and to use our brand, you have to be in line with our broader values, and you have to agree with them. And we have also like a double membership. Most people who are members of national chapters are also in some form involved in the international organization. So while we don't want to and shouldn't have direct control, we like work together on the guardrails. And for this, we have our international bodies, the Federal Council, but also like a General Assembly where all members from all the national parties can join and vote on policy directions, where we just like create the overall policy directions. And all these national chapters adapt them and make them fit into like the local culture, the local laws. This is up to them. We don't want to interfere with that. We also can't. For example, I'm living in Munich and Warsaw. I don't know what's the best policy for Prague or for Budapest. That has to be implemented by people that are local, who know the laws and know how to like brand and package European federalism the best. And the long-term goal, of course, is that we get in as many national countries as possible a big followership. And then in 2029, the next European Parliament elections, we get from as many countries as possible members, so we can form our own faction and create our own Ave Europa, like an European party within the European Parliament that can then vote together and coordinate together. So that's how we approach it.
Thank you. The next question is about identity and how Ave Europa thinks about it. So at Ave Europa, how do you see regional, national, and European identity fitting together? And which one comes first for you, or according to the party?
That's a very good question. I think also one that's very important, because identity is something people are nowadays very divided, and it's very, I think, identity is a very personal topic. And we have something in our policy and also like in our founding documents we called a layered identity. So all these national and European identities and regionals, they are not exclusive, but they are like layers. And for example, of course, the European identity for us is what we want to promote. We think, especially nowadays, looking at the geopolitical climate, and on mass migration, on Russia attacking Europe, on MAGA attacking Europe, China attacking Europe, the European identity, that we are all Europeans, that we have more in common than that it divides us, and we should work together for our own joint common good. This we want to promote. But this doesn't exclude other identities. So, for example, myself, I see myself primarily as an European. Then I'm also a Polish guy and a German guy. And then I'm also a Bavarian. Maybe I am even more a Bavarian than I am a German, to be honest, because Bavaria has very strong regional identity and it's very different from the rest of Germany. So maybe I'm more European first, then Bavarian, then Polish, then German. And then I have also my local patriotism for Munich and for Warsaw. And I can be all these things at the same time, and they're not exclusive. And we should also not try to erase the local identities, because that people identify with a certain region. They identify with their city, with their country, with Europe, with patriotism, with love for your own region, your identity is, I think, a very important part of social cohesion, and also for making sure that things are going well. I see that, for example, in Poland. Poland has a lot of local patriotism, and people care way more about how the streets look, if they are clean, for example, than there are in other parts of Europe where this local patriotism has been more erased. So I think we have to strengthen all layers of identity, national, regional, from your town up to the union. And it's not exclusive, but all an integral part of the same framework.
Thank you. The next question is about propagating or making the European identity more popular. So in Ave Europa's Charter of Principles and Values, it states that it rejects divisive Americanized identity politics, leftist progressivism, which means wokeism, reactionary nationalism, demagoguery, populism, political cults, and religious sectarianism in broader European culture. So my question would be the following: like, even if Europe, if European political actors avoid these terms and the debates, the United States still exercises enormous soft power influence. Most of the apps we use are American. For example, when I scrolled TikTok, I know it's can be called Chinese, but still, when I scrolled through TikTok today, every second video was about Candace Owens talking about Charlie Kirk. Like, how do these topics affect us in Europe? That's my question. And besides that, every movie that we consume, cultural product that we consume, are from America. So we are waiting for the next episode of Stranger Things, not for the next episode of a European series. So the question would be the following: how does Ave Europa propose to strengthen European soft power in this environment? And do we need our own European digital platforms, or even a European equivalent of Hollywood to balance this influence? Because I think it's very important.
Yes, it's very important. As you say, where America has a very big cultural hegemony, especially in Europe, as you said, most of the culture we consume is American, which also leads to the introduction of many American discourses into European politics, like all this American identitarianism between blacks and whites. These discourses, they come over to Europe, where we have a very different history and very different issues, but people start applying with American discourses and issues of society onto Europe, which has a way more complex and diverse multi-ethnic history, which you have to take into account. And there's, I think, a lot of tensions, political and cultural, come from this mismatch between we are consuming American culture, which doesn't really reflect our European realities. And I think here, this fact that cultural production, American, and our apps we use, and also, right now we are having a call through Google Meets, it's also American. This has its roots in very clear economic reasons, actually. If you look at how the world nowadays is organized, with the global supply chains, it's basically Europe produces machines. We build robots, we build factories, we build machines you use to build semiconductors with ASML. So basically, we do a lot of B2B. Also, if it comes to software, I used to work at Dassault Systems, which is one of the big computer-aided design software giants in the world, basically unknown to normal customers. But this Europe produces the stuff that makes the run the industry. We sell it to China. China manufactures stuff, and at the end, the United States, the Americans, they do the B2C business. They design stuff. They sell it to the end consumer. So basically, Americans design and sell the products to everyday people, including also apps and consumer goods. Europe makes the machines, and China uses the machines. This is like the global supply chain, you can say. And we have massively benefited from that, because that's division of labor. That means we got very good in it, especially if you look at Central Europe. We have the best companies in the world for that. But this also means that in the last decades, while the Americans got really good at B2C business, at doing consumer apps, at producing movies, at selling products, they also started to dominate our online discourses and our media, and especially the media. If you look also at newspapers, not only on like movies, Netflix, and so on, but also on like really newspapers. Many of it in Europe nowadays owned by American companies, like for example the Springer Group in Germany, Axel Springer Group, with the biggest newspapers. They have been bought by KKR, an American private equity firm. So the root issue of our cultural predicament today is this global division of labor, which led to the fact that the Americans now control basically our culture, but also a big chunk of our democratic discourses, which can be very toxic, because if much of our democratic discourse is running through X, and Elon Musk wants to abolish the EU and boosts Russian bots that tell shit about us, this has damaging effects on our democracy. So basically, our policy, we would say as Ave Europa, if we get elected, would be to actually change this underlying economic predicament. And I think here we have to say the Chinese did something very smart, is they basically said, American tech, big tech, American media, we don't let that into our country, only in limited ways. Of course, the Chinese said that because they are in dictatorship, the Communist Party of China, and they want to control the narratives and everything. And we don't want that. We want democratic open discourse, but I think in critical sectors like media and culture, we have to realize that in a democratic society, who controls the media and the culture can exert a very big influence on democracy. I mean, we see that in Hungary, where Orban's friends own the media.
Yes, it's very funny. Antonio Gramsci, the
yes,
Marxist,
I wrote a strategy paper based on Gramsci a few years ago.
Yeah,
because he said the same.
Basically,
yeah.
Many of I would say, in think tanks close to the Hungarian government, actually they wrote, it's somewhere there, they wrote how books on how the right wing government should use these Gramscian ideas to create a cultural hegemony. So
yeah, I mean, that's an idea of cultural hegemony. So Gramsci basically said culture, civil institutions, media are like the bunkers and trenches that are surrounding the heart of democracy. And if you want to get power, you have to control these trenches and bunkers, the cultural production. And I mean, in the 60s, the hippies, the leftists in Western Europe followed Gramscian tactics and conquered many universities. But then, especially in France, the Nouvelle Droite, the new right around Alain de Benoist, introduced this into far-right discourse and introduced then also like Russian far-right ideologues like Alexander Dugin to these ideas. And nowadays, they're pretty mainstream, especially on the far right and also among totalitarians, because they are true. These are the trenches of democracy and of every civil society. And I think we have to start looking at social media and cultural production exactly this way. Exactly like, for example, when manufacturing of weapons or of critical resources, media is a critical part of modern, especially democratic society, and it shouldn't be completely or big chunk foreign owned. So a concrete policy we would advocate would be to actually say, okay, we can only have so many foreign media in our country, let's say 30-40%. The exact would have to be, I don't have it now because we haven't written the detailed policies. We are still working on that. But to say we limit that, and whatever you have too much, you will have to sell to European companies, to Europeans, and we will also have to build our own. And this will be a slow transition, but I think we have in the long run to get like our own European X, our own European social media, our own YouTube. I mean, we are not completely free of that. I mean, we have, for example, Spotify, I think, which is Swedish, if I'm not mistaken, which is a kind of social media platform. I think it's the only really successful European one. But I think there is a model and we could follow that, and it will take time. Until then, I think the best approach are actually the things the European Union is doing right now, trying to rein in big tech, American big tech and Chinese big tech with things like the Digital Service Act. And I mean, that's also why Elon Musk and the other oligarchs from Russia and America are so angry at the European Union right now. It's not because the European Union is infringing really on partially it is in some countries, but free speech is not the core issue here. The core issue is that the Americans are now angry that the EU is limiting their ability to manipulate our democracies. And I think we have to be just very firm on that and force these laws. And if this doesn't work, I mean, the Americans now are forcing TikTok to sell out its American business. We could maybe try to do the same thing with Meta and saying, well, you have to sell your European part of Instagram to a European company. That will be a very ugly battle. But I think Europe has to say at some point, we have to protect our democracies. And there's no other way that we get our hands on our own infrastructure.
Thank you very much. So we talked about cultural autonomy, we can call it that.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is about strategic autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So Ave Europa states that Europe has relied on external guarantees for security, primarily really from NATO, allowing it to focus inwardly on economic prosperity and social welfare. But now you argue that this approach must change. And does it mean you support the idea of European strategic autonomy? And if so, should it be developed within the framework of NATO or independently of it?
Mm-hmm. So one of our actually core goals of Ave Europa is to have a sovereign Europe that is strategically autonomous. So yes, we need strategic autonomy, but how do we mean that? I think it's nowadays quite obvious that, especially, I don't think that's the case for like Poland or the Baltics, but especially Western Europe and Central Europe, like Germany, for the last 2 decades after the Cold War ended, really became a little bit lazy if it comes to defense and defense spending and underinvested, and enjoyed the peace dividend while the Americans made a lot of the strategic security. And this has to change, I think, for 2 reasons. For one, we see right now that America is becoming increasingly misaligned with European goals. I would say this is now becoming very obvious with Trump, but this has been going on for longer. I mean, already under Obama, we had the issue that Ukraine, Crimea, and Eastern Ukraine got invaded by Russia, and we had security guarantees from the Budapest Memorandum for Ukraine. Obama didn't intervene. Instead, there was a lot of interventionism around Europe and the Middle East, in Libya and Syria, by the Americans, mostly, and by the Russians. And this caused massive refugee crisis and mass migration to Europe, because the Americans and the Russians as well, bombed around our continent because it was convenient for their strategy. And then we had to carry the burden of having mass migration dividing also our continent. And there, I think already on Obama, we could see that what's in the security interests of Europe and what's in the security interests of the United States, this isn't a perfect match. And if we don't want the Americans to dictate our security, we have to stand up our own and also develop, for example, capabilities to protect our trade routes. Like at the beginning of this year, the Houthis attacked tankers. We had to basically wait for American missiles because we didn't have enough ships in the region, neither from the French nor from the Germans, to intervene and protect our trade routes from Asia. And here, I think we can't, for one, the interests are not perfectly aligned. And the second thing is we also see increasingly that America, under Trump especially, is accelerating in the isolationism and in this misalignment because they care more about the Pacific. They care also especially Trump administration, is very close to Russia, which is rather our adversary. So we have to think about a world where maybe America doesn't protect us anymore, or where actively America is doing things aggressively against our interests, against which we have to protect ourselves. Because right now we have Russian mercenaries and American proxy groups fighting in Libya, and also some French ones, which have a massive impact on our security here in Europe. And why are the Russians and Americans basically in front of our door determining the security situation? We should be able to say, okay, something's happening in front of our door steps, we should be able to intervene ourselves. And regarding, here again, within NATO or independently of it, I think we should continue to work with NATO and hope that the Americans start to take us serious again and treat us as equal partners. And I think the precondition for that is actually Europe acting united as one federation, because single small states don't have the negotiation power. But we have also to make sure that, for example, our military would also function in the case where the United States abandons us, or actually maybe even switches sides and starts waging maybe some proxy war against us together with the Russians in 10 years. It doesn't look like it is happening right now, but we should have this fail-safe. So we shouldn't buy F-35s from the Americans that are reliant on American server updates and data links and servers, but build our own in-house capabilities. And so stay in NATO, but be prepared for the worst case of America abandoning NATO. That's basically the answer.
So in the case of this worst scenario, in the Charter of Principles, you talk about a post-Atlanticist approach, and the creation of a new European worldview. But does it also mean a new world order which would be a tripolar world order? And do you think that Europe could be a part of this tripolar world order as a single entity next to the United States and China? Russia is not capable anymore of becoming this, but still.
Yeah. I mean, it's very obvious at this point for me that the American hegemony, the Pax Americana, is coming to an end. The Americans are neither willing, nor I think will be capable for long to play the world police and have this global hegemony. They're losing it already in Asia. And so we are heading towards a multipolar world. And the question is, will be it a bipolar world like in the Cold War, but this time against China and the United States, with European countries again divided between some blocks, which would happen if the European Union will be breaking apart. It's not unlikely that we will get colonized and fought over again, as we did in the Cold War. And the other option is that Europe becomes a unified single actor, united Europe, like a European federation that we want to achieve, that can actually stand up for itself and can say, well, we are on power. And I mean, we are half a billion people. We are 500 million Europeans. We have an economy that is bigger than that of China. We have high-tech production capabilities. We could have a military and an industry that is bigger than that of the Americans. Europe could be and has the potential to be a world power on the same level as America and China are, and even at the current state, and probably for the next 100 years, bigger than China, if you look at the economic predictions, because also China is peaking in many relative ways. They have now also a very hard demographic crisis. So we want to be Europe one of the poles in the multipolar world that can defend itself and can say, well, we are not a colony. We our own thing, our own bloc, independent and free. Does that mean we aim for a Pax Europea or something like that, a new European-based world order? No, I don't see that, because in a multipolar world with Europe, United States, and China, with Russia as an appendix probably to China, if it doesn't get balkanized in the fallout of the war in Ukraine, it will be not the world of the American single hegemony we had in the last decades, but it will be a multipolar world. And I think the ambition to enforce the European order on the world and say, well, we Europeans know the best what works for the world. This has been the mistake, I think, of colonialism, the mistake of both world wars. Okay, in the world wars, it was mostly the Germans saying we know it better for the rest of the world, which led to mass destruction and for Europe losing big out. If you look, basically, we never recovered from World War One in our relative strength on the world. So I think the ambition to rule the world or become the new global hegemon, this is megalomania, and if you look at history, it's destructive. We should look at Europe first, look at getting order in Europe, try to secure and stabilize Europe, make it a fortress that can withstand attacks from America, from Russia, from China, and expansionism from the Islamic world, and can stand up for itself, for its own civilization. And that still engages in the world. We are not isolationists. We should still engage diplomatically with the world. But I think the age of global empires, it's over. And maybe Putin and Xi Jinping haven't noticed yet. But I think this is not feasible in our modern world anymore. And no, we want Europe to be safe, and the rest of the world, they can govern themselves. We don't want to interfere. And yeah, that would be my answer for that.
Thank you. There's one more question about identity.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, what do you think, what is Europe in the context of geography? For example, does Turkey a part of Europe according to Ave Europa? And what are the borders of our continent? It's especially relevant in the context of EU accessions.
Well, I think it's a bit of a tricky question, because as we understand Europe at Ave Europa, it's primarily a cultural thing. And you could say, for example, that Boston is one of the most European cities of the world. And if you go to Boston, the Bostonians, they feel very European. You can get all the European foods in Boston. And I think they sometimes wish they were still British if you go there. And we see Europe as a primarily cultural thing, a certain cultural identity based on a shared heritage. We have our history of Roman and Greek philosophy, law, Christian philosophy, Enlightenment philosophy, democratic institutions, a certain mix that is very specific to Europe, and maybe also parts of the Commonwealth countries like Canada and Australia and parts of America. And geographically, I think, for example, Turkey, we have to say Turkey is not European in the sense that it has a very different culture. It used to be a secularized version of Islam. Now under Erdogan, it gets more Islamic again. But it's very different from what most of Europe is. And for us, Europe is I think the EU plus, we say always 6 countries, which are right now not in the European Union, but we would like to have them in our European Federation. It's Switzerland, Norway, Ukraine, Georgia, and also in the long run, Belarus, Armenia, and maybe Azerbaijan, which depends on a lot of development. Right now, it's not likely for the next, I think, decades. But with our borders, we would say like geographic of the current nation states. Realistically, I think Belarus and Armenia and Azerbaijan, who are like more on the fringes of European civilization, will take longer, especially as Belarus is still under Russian occupation, basically with a puppet regime with Lukashenko. So this will take longer, but basically these are the countries. And for example, we don't see Russia as a part of Europe because Russia is a very different, we would say, civilization. They have very different worldview. They have basically still a feudal society to this day, and they don't fit into Europe. And so we don't want to touch that. If that makes sense.
That's interesting. Okay, and the last question is about literally words and how Ave Europe would name this state, a European federalized state, because in these federalist circles we can hear the term United States of Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
Next to the phrase "Make Europe Great Again," and these two are "Make Europe Great Again" is used by the radicalized right as well. But my question is the following: does Ave Europe think about this whole federalism as like a European version of the United States, or do you think that we should create our own terms? Create our own narrative? Because I think, in my opinion, that it would be a very important thing if we talk about federalism to not to use the US as an example for everything. And for example, I see that they use the American flag with the colors of the European Union for the possible flag of the European Federation. So what do you think about this?
I think we reject the notion of calling ourselves United States of Europe because we don't want to be an imitation or rather like a parody of the United States, and we also don't want to transfer the American model. I mean, there are, of course, some parallels. We want a federal state, and the United States of America are a federal state of sorts. But we have a very different culture, different approach, and we want to do our own thing. And I think calling it United States of Europe, this is a very transatlanticist, born idea, way of thinking. Same thing as making Europe great again, this mega stuff that's mostly parroting by Elon Musk and his cronies here in Europe, like the far-right populists, which this doesn't fit really in our European culture. It's, again, like a mismatch what we get from American media and how reality in Europe is. And we at Ave Europa, we have not a clear agreement yet how we will call it. I mean, it's very likely that if we really reform it from Europe, from the European Union, maybe the name will stay for a long time European Union. And when the ideal name change would be probably the Republic of Europe, and we will just call it Europe. This is Europe. And it will be the Republic or Federal Republic of Europe, but certainly not the United States of Europe, because we are not starting with states or colonies. We're starting with nations, with sovereign nations who decide that they are merging into a bigger body to work together. And it doesn't make sense here to copy the American model. I think our role model is a little bit. We are working on detailed policy on that, how we want to make the country, but our model is more like a mix maybe of Swiss and German federalism, and with a pinch of American, of course, ideas. But we want to have more direct democracy, of course, as also the Americans have, but not at the same levels, because in America you have, depends on the states, you have it's very chaotic. And some things like the sheriffs are elected in some parts of America by the people. I think this doesn't make sense that you elect a sheriff. But so we won't do that. So we follow more a Swiss Germanized model with a pinch of original flavors, and it will be probably Republic of Europe.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are in the end of the discussion. I have 3 more questions regarding the future of the party. The first one is the following. What events and initiatives does Ave Europa plan for the near future?
So we are planning around the clock things. We have on our website, if you go, we have Ave Europa .eu/events. We list most of them. We have a lot of regional events where we have local meetups. Like actually tomorrow is the meetup. So on the 13th of December 2025, we have a local meetup of a German chapter in Munich. Next week on the 20th of December, we have a meetup, I think, in Utrecht for the Dutch chapter. Then in January, the first week, there's again one in Germany. Then there is one in Brussels, one in Italy, and so on. So we organize right now a lot of regional events to bring people together, just meetups where people meet at some house, at some restaurant, some co-working space, and discuss together the future of our movement. And the big thing we plan for the upcoming year, 2026, will be in May, our General Assembly. For this, we have booked actually close to Strasbourg, but on the German side of the border, castle, the Castle Ortenberg. You can actually, if you are in this castle, you can see Strasbourg from the window. So the parliament is on the horizon. And this will be on the 1st of May to the 3rd of May. And we will bring together 140 of our most active members and some external guests from different organizations. For example, we will have Gunther Fellinger as a guest, who you also had on your podcast. We will have Tigran, the chairman of the European Party of Armenia. We will have a few Brussels think tank people as guests who will talk with us, do workshops with us, try to upskill our movement, but also elect and confirm our current leadership, vote on policy. And this will be our big event in May. 1st to 3rd, bringing together all of Ave Europa, either physically in this castle in southwest Germany or hybridly through internet, live streams, and so on. So this is the big event we are currently preparing and working a lot. And beyond that, it's all the regional and national meetups. And one thing we will decide actually tomorrow, so I can't say if we do it or not, that we wanted in Germany to run in regional, so German state elections in 2026. Initially, we thought we could do that in the Baden-Württemberg elections in March, but German paperwork, bureaucracy, it's a cliche, but it took too long. It took us months, and now we're a little bit behind schedule. So maybe we will skip that election and start running in the fall of 2026 in other more regional elections. And yeah, these are the most pressing, most immediate events and initiatives we are doing. Mostly growing our movement, organizing, and yeah, everyone who was interested in Ave Europa, check out our website and you can see the events. And maybe there's a meetup close to you. And if not, you can also join us and help organize them.
Okay. So people can join easily.
Yes, we have on our website, there's a form. You can just go there. You can fill it out. There are a few questions about your background because we want to make sure people are aligned with us and we don't get any Russian trolls. We had a few of them. We had to kick them. So we have some background checks before we let people into our community. And we have our own, several layers. We have one Discord and WhatsApp communities. And then we have our own intranet where we actually do the work on our own servers. But you can apply for all of that on our website. There's just a simple web form you fill out. And usually within an hour or two, you should get a message from one of our recruiters who will onboard you and tell you how the things work and add you to the right groups and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. So, the last question, where do you think the party and Europe will be in 10 years or in the future, basically?
Well, in 10 years, I hope, and I'm quite confident that we will make it, is that Ave Europa is one of the biggest parties in the European Parliament, which may sound a little bit megalomaniac, but we have 200 parties in the European Parliament. And the big advantage is if you are like a party that is in all 27 European Union countries, is that you can get people from everywhere. So if we follow through everything we have planned and grow as much as we planned, we will become the largest party in Europe, just because we are like active in all European countries and not just in one. Because if you are active everywhere, if you get 5%, 10% in all countries, you are bigger than even like a party that has 40% in Germany, just due to being able to organize the entire continent. So this is actually our ambition: become the biggest party in the European Parliament and one of the biggest political parties in Europe, and use that influence then to leverage for the unification of Europe. So I think, hopefully, in 10 years, Ave Europa will have already achieved that goal. So, I mean, it's like 2.5 election cycles away for European Parliament. At this point, we will have enough influence, and hopefully, as I said before, Volt is on the other side as well. They also have like 5-10%. So we have like 20% European Federalists, 10% Volt, 10% us in the European Parliament. That would be awesome, because I think then we could be like really play the kingmakers and exert enough influence to federalize Europe. I mean, I wish if I had the power right now, and I would federalize Europe tomorrow and unite it, because looking at the geopolitical and economic situation, we should have federalized decades ago and not work on it now. But the next best thing is to work on it now, and hopefully in 10 years, we will have achieved our mission and united Europe. And I'm quite optimistic that we will do it. The time is right.
Thank you very much. I think that it was these words were great for the end of the interview. Thank you for your participation. And if you'd like the video, then you please subscribe and follow our other platforms as well. And in the description, we will put the website of Ave Europa as well, and also their social media accounts. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.